Before I introduce our featured artists, I will just say, standing here, this looks just like a faculty meeting, except friendlier. Pleased to introduce to you, to begin the evening's...
They're going to come halfway.
This is the story of my life. Bill Schechter telling me that they're not singing now. Pleased to introduce to you the preparation for the vocal jazz ensemble. Now, in all seriousness, it's great to see so many people here. I feel after 10 years at LS, this is my 11th year, I feel like I'm beginning to be a part of the school because I recognize or knew so many of our wonderful, legendary ex-faculty members and staff members who showed up, and it's just terrific to see everyone. And a privilege to be present at an occasion like this. I think one of the things that is most remarkable about this school, and in the back of my mind I'm hearing Andy Oleski say to me from the stairs, "Brevity, John, brevity!" So I won't go on too long, but one of the really remarkable things about this school is its sense of history and its sense of itself. And I think that's a wonderful thing for an institution to celebrate its past, not to live in its past, but to celebrate its past. And that's something I think this school has always done exceptionally well. And this evening is one of those evenings where the past becomes the present. And we get a chance to see old friends and honor, as I say, legendary individuals who've worked here. And it's just my privilege to be a part of this and to end up being one of the people at the microphone to welcome all of you. The first thing I want to do is recognize and reward for their years of service Colleen and Jackie. Get these two to take home. Not you or you. But I didn't want to hand those to you. Okay, that concludes this evening's program. Well, I'm really sort of speechless when I do this. The three individuals being honored tonight are people, all three of whom are known to me. Tom Pachowski, I didn't intersect with, though I met many times, most often at the Plotz house. And what goes on at the Plotz house stays at the Plotz house, I'll tell you that. But Duz and Andy I had a chance to work with, so I got to see them both on a professional and then ultimately a personal level. And I want to introduce each of them to you in alphabetical order, and I'll say a little bit, and I know other people have remarks that they want to make. But before I do that, let me read a little bit of a letter, a piece of a letter that I got, that we got from Wayne Ogden. And I think many of you know Wayne, who has gone on to be a superintendent of schools in Franklin. And he writes, "I am terribly disappointed that I cannot attend Lincoln-Sudbury's 50th anniversary celebration due to a conflict with my school committee's reorganization meeting." Great, I love those meetings. "While I will be sad to miss an opportunity to learn more about Lincoln-Sudbury's place in the universe, I am heartbroken that I will not be in attendance to hear the recognition of Tom, Jim, and Andy. During my 12 years at Lincoln-Sudbury, I learned from many great teachers and administrators. Amazingly, it was not that difficult to have a great mentor because the place was full of extraordinarily talented individuals. You will be rededicating parts of your new facility to 4 such individuals at this celebration. Mitchell, Harriet, Ginny, and Bob were among the best that Lincoln-Sudbury had to offer, and I think we'll also be rededicating the Horton Gym. The LS Wall of Recognition is a very special place in the collective history of the school. It epitomizes everything that is Lincoln-Sudbury, the total commitment of a very talented group of adults toward the development of the hearts, minds, and bodies of generations of kids from Lincoln, Boston, and Sudbury. Few teachers in Lincoln-Sudbury's history made kids' brains stretch the way Pachowski did, while he taught them to think deeply about great literature. No individuals in Lincoln-Sudbury's history have done more to develop the hearts and minds of their students than did Duz and Andy. Unlike Tom's classroom, reliably in one place from year to year, Dews and Andy moved their teaching from the gyms to the weight rooms and playing fields onto the mountains, roads, and rivers of New England for their Nimbus trips. But regardless of the venue, the quality of their instruction was always the best there was. Most of what I know and believe about helping kids find themselves was taught to me by my mentor colleagues at Lincoln-Sudbury. Dews and Andy and Tom were three of the best. Congratulations to them and to Lincoln-Sudbury for recognizing the contributions of these three men. Sincerely, Wayne Ogden. Let's start with Dews. We could go on forever about each of these guys. Dews is just a great guy. He and I fell in love with each other one Valentine's Day. Some of you know that story. After all, this is LS. And I don't know how many years we worked together. We were here for a while together, 4. And the things he did for the kids in this school, the things he did for the programs in this school sort of beggar description. And I am pleased and privileged to have known him, to continue to know him, and grateful to work in a school where he has had such a profound influence on not only all the adults that he worked with, but as Wayne says, generation of kids. And what a gift that is to the world. So Dews, congratulations. Do we have a reader? Is somebody coming forward to read? Our own Leslie Belcher. This, by the way, the plaque that Leslie is going to read will be placed on the wall, not near where you taught, because that would be...
It's gone.
We'll figure out where it should go.
Hi, Dews. Some of you might not know this, but I came and student taught under Dews, so I feel honored to read this. A compassionate mentor, Jim Dusenberry filled many roles for LS, and he left his mark of excellence on all. He established one of the finest gymnastic programs in the state, which gave students tremendous opportunity never before available. He helped implement the Nimbus program, which pioneered an outward-bound approach, providing students with a new appreciation for the outdoors. Dews' emotional intelligence and kindness were trademarks of his persona. Whether dealing with students, colleagues, or parents, Dews had a way of making people feel important. Through his goodwill, Jim could bring together the disjointed, create a true team, and forge ahead toward a common mission. Always able to take the high road, Jim was the ultimate warrior.
Let me interrupt this cavalcade of presentations for a moment to give you a little sense of history very briefly. The wall of recognition onto which your names are being placed tonight was the brainstorm of my predecessor at LS, Matt King. And I don't want to pick one person out of many, but Matt had a job like mine, so I feel appropriate in welcoming him, but also thanking you, Matt, for starting this tradition which continues tonight. It's just wonderful. And I also want to say, as part of my ongoing parenthetical comment here, that there's a committee that makes these selections. And the committee changes slightly over the years, but is a fairly static group, and it consists of me, Bill Schechter, Pam Shreve, who is now on the committee, having taken the place of Nancy Ragnow when she retired, Nicole Digenus, Susan Fromer, Paula Wolf, and Jim Newton. And I got to tell you, making decisions about selections of people to be placed on the wall is really, really, really hard. It's very painful, in fact, in some ways, because we are dedicated to the proposition that the people selected should be not just people who were great individuals and great teachers, but people who really transcended normal expectations in terms of their contributions to an institution. And I want to say in this year's instance, the selections fortunately were easy. There was never a question. So I should have said it at the beginning, but I'll say it now. The next recipient is, I feel like I'm repeating myself, but so many of the things that you say about Dews, you say about Andy, and I don't mean to diminish either of them by making that comment. But truly a great individual, great inspiration to all of the kids that he coached, that he taught, to the colleagues, many of whom aspired to his level of professionalism, honesty, and integrity. There is so much in this school that you wouldn't recognize perhaps in our new corporate headquarters, but which is a reflection of and a result of the work of Andy Oleski. Just a great guy, a great contributor, and in the 2 times I've been to the Wellness Center in 10 years, I've thought of you each time. I think Nancy O'Neill is going to come to the podium and read Andy's plaque.
And I feel so lucky to be at Lincoln-Sudbury, and it's because of both Dews and Andy who recruited me and changed my life forever, to have the opportunity to work in such a terrific place. And they're fun guys. There's no one who knows how to find their play better than Andy and Dews. So it's good stuff. Andy, baby. A champion. Andy Oleski's legacy is multi-dimensional. As the impetus behind the LS All Sports Boosters Club, he paved the way for ongoing excellence in athletic program support. As a coach, he started a boys lacrosse program continuously held in high esteem. He helped implement Nimbus, the LS version of Outward Bound. The LS Fitness Center, a facility way ahead of its time, thrives today because of his vision, creativity, and tenacity. Perhaps it was Andy's perseverance and sense of humor that separated him from the rest. Andy understood that there were no shortcuts to any place worth going. This fun-loving and mischievous leader never knew when he was beaten, so he never was.
As I mentioned, I had occasion to meet Tom Pachowski probably 4 or 5 times, and it was, in fact, I think every time at the Plotz House. I might be wrong about that, but I'll never forget the first time I met him, he introduced himself in that incredibly deep, compelling voice of his. And I expected him to ask me a typical question such as, how do you like your job, or do you like LS? But I think he looked me in the eye and he said, what have you read recently? Just a profound thinker, inspirer. I remember, he was teaching when now that I remember, I think my first year he was emeritus, and often heard about him from parents who would call and tell me about the experiences their children were having in his Russian literature class, and he really forced kids to read. It's not like the Woody Allen story about how he took speed reading and read War and Peace in 8 minutes. It's about Russia. Tom Pachowski's kids didn't speed read. I think they really read. And it's a privilege to be honoring him. We hoped he could come tonight. I think he just found that the trip was too tough to make. We tried and tried, and Karen, I know Thompson called, but it was his decision not to come, and that's fine, but we'll make sure he gets all the plaques and everything else. And I think Judy Plott, I believe, is going to read Tom's plaque.
When Bill Schechter asked me to write this, I thought, how do you convey Pachowski? And then when he told me I had 120 words, I said, no way. I'm a failure. Tom is one of a kind, a scholar and a thinker who always put his students first, never giving up on them. Armed with a box of crackers and probing questions scribbled on a scrap of paper, Tom entered class ready to provide a little food and much wisdom, to encourage, cajole, and nurture his students' thinking and reading. People, you must read every day. He conveyed with passion the value of books, whether teaching Russian literature or English 9. Teaching and inspiring not only his students but also his colleagues, he would insist, never give less than everything to your students. They deserve your best. That commitment and dedication make him integral to the Lincoln-Sudbury legacy.
Now, before we applaud, which I would like us to do in his absence, there is someone who came tonight who's one of Tom's former students. Where is that person?
Am I the only one?
Anything you want to say? Sorry to call on you on the spot, but that's what I do.
I had Mr. Petrowski sort of peripherally through Frank Hayes 30 years ago. Graduated in '67. And as I said to Dr. Ritchie earlier, I was sorry to miss Frank's dedication because he was my English teacher my senior year, and we did tutorials. And my tutorial was James Joyce. I wasn't too ambitious. And I actually got through Ulysses, but I foundered on Finnegan's Wake. But it was Mr. Petrowski who said, would you come to my class? You know, he was so inspirational. And he said, I just want you to come and talk about James Joyce. And as I was talking, he was pacing. And he was pacing around the room. You could see he was thinking, and he was interrupting and asking questions. And that's how I always remember him, just allowing a student to actually teach.
Thanks for those comments. How about a big rousing round of applause? The next thing we want to do is the rededication ceremony. Before we do that, let me also mention how delighted I am to have our old friend Duke here tonight, also present on the wall. And if you take a look, when we go down to the auditorium, Duke carved the new signs for the Kirshner Auditorium and the Rogers Theater in his inimitable fashion. So you should take a look at those lasting contributions, again, made to us by Duke. And now we have the LS Vocal Jazz Ensemble. She whispers to me in a stage whisper.
Slow down, you move too fast. You gotta make the morning last. Just kicking down the cobblestones, looking for fun and feeling groovy. Bubbidi-abba-doo-doo-doo-ah, feeling groovy.
Hello, lamppost, what you doing? I've got to watch I was going. Ain't you got no times for me?
Doodly-doo, feeling groovy. Bubbidi-abba-doo-doo-ah, feeling groovy. I got no deeds to do, no promises to keep. I'm dappled and drowsy and ready to sleep. Let the morning sun drop all its petals on me. Life, I love you, all is groovy. Bubbidi-abba-doo-doo-ah, feeling groovy. Ba-ba-ba-ba-doo-ay-oh, ba-ba-ba-ba-dee-ah. Ba-ba-ba-ba-doo-ay-oh, ba-ba-ba-ba-dee-ah. Ba-ba-ba-ba-doo-ay-oh. I'm dappled and drowsy and ready to sleep. Let the morning sun drop all its petals on me. Life, I love you, all is groovy. Ba-ba-dee-ah-ba-doo-dee-ah, feeling groovy. Ba-ba-dee-ah-ba-doo-dee-ah, feeling groovy. Ba-ba-dee-ah-ba-doo-dee-ah, feeling groovy. Feeling groovy. Do-do-do-do-do-ba-doo-ba-doo-ah. It's groovy.
We don't make them go to class, we just let them rehearse. I'm going to see if I can persuade Andy and Dews to get up and say a word or two, but before I do that, I was remiss, I introduced Matt King. I also want to introduce two of my other predecessors who are here, Brad Sargent and Dave Levington. Great to see you both. Hi, Dave. These are the only people in the room who know what my life is like. The other thing I want to do before you guys have to speak for a half hour each is ask all of the people whose names have been placed on the wall of recognition over the years, including the two newest, to stand so we can congratulate and thank all of them. I don't think we can let them get away. We're going to move to this rededication portion in just a second, but I don't think we can let these two guys get away without at least saying something, even if it's just thanks. Dews?
I promise not to cry. I'm just the luckiest man alive. This is just the best, and to have been a part of Lincoln-Sudbury for really 40 years now. Little known fact is that I student taught here myself and realized what a wonderful place this was, and really kind of hoped to get a job here in 1966. It didn't work out, which turned out to be a great thing for me. I wound up teaching elementary school in Sudbury, where I had the present chairman of the school committee, Mark Collins, is one of my students. And then back to grad school, because I didn't really care for the young children that much. Good experience, but glad to go back to grad school, work with college kids. And then a couple of years at North Reading, teaching junior high school and high school, and knowing exactly that high school was what I really wanted to do. And my student teaching, really, I knew that Lincoln-Sudbury would be the correct place for me. And Lou Baldwin was instrumental in helping me get back here. Joe Kleiser was the person that hired both Andy and I. And that was, one of the best, certainly the best thing professionally that ever happened to me. A couple of other things that I think we had a real influence on way back, right after I was hired and Andy's first year. We started an elective program. Instead of boys' gym and girls' gym, we actually had an elective program. And the students were somewhat allowed to take courses that they were more interested in. Certainly that has evolved into the wellness program now, which I couldn't be more proud of. And the people that are now responsible for the wellness program, Leslie and Nancy, I certainly feel that we have the program in excellent, excellent hands. It is a quality program. It's a program that's a good example for everyone in the state of Massachusetts and even in the country. The last thing that I'd really like to recognize is my time as athletic director. Working with other schools and working with our coaches was a tremendous opportunity for me. And it's really hard to explain how different Lincoln-Sudbury really is. I would go to athletic directors' meetings and explain, just naturally how much fun I'd had at school that day. And they didn't get it. They really didn't. I don't think they had anywhere near as much fun at school. At least needless to say, I'd like to thank Dave Levington and Brad and Matt and John, Andy and George Horton for sure, and all of my colleagues. It was just a tremendous 30 years here and 40 years being a part of the community. Thank you again very much. I appreciate it.
Mr. Oleski, your turn.
As always, Jimmy's a tough act to follow, and can echo everything he has said tenfold. I look around, and the people I see, and the faces I see, the colleagues, what all you folks have contributed to this high school, they better make that wall a lot bigger, because there's just a tremendous amount of good that has been done here for the children at this high school. When I retired, I got a note from Bill Schechter, and amongst other things he said, let's see, I will miss hearing English the way it was meant to be spoken. So I will do my best. Again, I want to thank the committee. I want to thank all the guests here, my close friends that are here. I want to thank congratulate and thank the former recipients, and also the people from the Wellness Department, because I believe myself standing here receiving this recognition is a tribute to you folks also. Thank you. And I'd like to, of course, thank my wife, Colleen, and you can imagine what she has to put up with. And being inducted with Jim and Tom. If I was a student at Lincoln-Sudbury, I'd love to have taken a class from Tom Plachowski. I think I could have sat for 45 minutes and listened to him. Brad and Dave and Matt, you guys have been great. You made it easy for somebody to work here. Made a very professional situation. Jimmy had Mark Collins as a student in elementary school. I had him on one of the first football teams we had here. So if some of you present teachers aren't being treated fairly, I have a lot of ammunition. Just give me a call. I'll take care of it. The contract, stuff like that, just give me a ring. I came under different circumstances. Jimmy, knowing he wanted to be here and student taught in the system, and applied for a job and get it the first time. I was a product of a SUNY school, Cortland, as the people from Springfield call it the other phys ed school. And I wanted to be on Long Island or in metropolitan New York in the worst way, where all my friends were and buddies and fellow teammates, and I wanted to coach football and coach lacrosse and kind of put all my eggs in one basket in a school on Long Island. It just didn't work out. So I heard about this job in Sudbury, Massachusetts through Joe Kleiser, who had a mutual friend at the school I was at. And it was at LSRHS. Well, what the hell does that mean? Looked it up. Lincoln-Sudbury Regional High School in Sudbury, Massachusetts. Well, I couldn't even spell Massachusetts. But I did get here, and it's probably the most fortunate thing that ever happened to me. I couldn't be more fortunate. Very lucky. Spent my career here teaching and coaching and doing some administration. It was really a way of life more than a job, and we had a lot of fun. Jimmy and I still we live within a mile of one another, reminisce about the 30 years here, and it always brings a smile to our face and a lot of laughter, especially when we think about George. And we just have to pinch ourselves about the whole situation. It's been great. I not only made a lot of good friends here, I made a lot of best friends. John, in his letter informing me that I was going to receive this recognition, stated, only those who have had a profound and long-lasting impact on the LS way of life are selected. Well, that's a two-way street. The Lincoln-Sudbury way of life has had a profound and long-lasting effect on me, and will continue to have that. So I want to thank everybody, and it's been special, and hope to see you folks many more years. Thank you.
Before we turn to the very brief rededication of facilities, which I'll explain briefly in a moment, I also want to give special thanks to Bill Schechter, who has been, as you can imagine, energetic in preparing this evening. And in fact, you should stop at the connector in the first building and look at the new history display, which features 50 years of LS history, which is a remarkable presentation, and again, Bill is responsible for that. In fact, I should take this opportunity to announce the new name for the high school, which will henceforth be known as Bill Schechter Presents Lincoln-Sudbury High School. So do you want to announce these? Great.
We've sort of been using those names, but we wanted to have an official rededication. So, first of all, do we have someone here from the Wentworth family? Could they come up? Where?
Jane?
Hi, Jane. Is there somebody else here?
Yeah.
Okay. And Dean, and we're going to ask, in a moment, ask Jean to remove this piece of paper, and but also ask Dean Aldrich to come up to just say a couple words about Bob. And Dean, you here? Yep. Okay. Okay. Well, let's first. Jane, you want to help remove the piece of paper?
Hope this goes well.
Bravo.
It's already been mentioned that Duke made all the signs, so they're all in place.
Bob Wentworth arrived at Lincoln-Sudbury in the summer of 1960 to establish a music department. Now, there had been music in the building, notably a girls' chorus conducted by Miriam Coombs. Some of you will remember her. She's alive and well in Concord, age 98. I ran into her last winter at the library. She was picking up a couple books and told me, I'm just going to do some light reading. So there you have it, light reading at 98, not bad, I would say. By the end of 2 years, Bob had established a mixed chorus of 200 voices, select chorus, 80 members, a madrigal group, an orchestra, a pep band that played at football games and rallies, as well as teaching music theory, music history. Bob later on led his groups on annual tours throughout New England and eventually 3 extensive tours in Europe. Now, he always chose challenging literature, and through his association with Harry Ellis Dixon, the assistant conductor of the Boston Symphony, there was a string of performances, notably a cantata by William Colegrass called "The Earth is a Baked Apple." Now, I'd like to think about that title for a moment. It was performed in the mid-'70s, and that work attempted to sum up and comment upon the decade of the 1960s. Now, you can imagine, it's a tough piece, and it was a tough decade, huh? But that's the sort of thing Bob chose, always challenging literature. Now, eventually, he teamed with the remarkable Harriet Rogers and did a string of musicals. I would say his favorite was "Stop the World, I Want to Get Off," which had soaring melodies and a strong anti-establishment theme. Now, the first musical performed at Lincoln-Sudbury was Finian's Rainbow. Now, along with the magical leprechauns dancing lovely tunes, there is in that musical a strong message of social realism. You might even say a hint of Marxism. And what that message is, working class people should get a break. Now, we haven't heard much about that lately, huh? But that appealed greatly to Bob. Something I'd like to mention about Bob was, quite in addition to his musical talent, if he saw a student who wasn't doing well in school, he would take this individual aside, try to get to know them, try to get them integrated, not necessarily into musical activity, but into the life of the school. That concern on his part persisted throughout his career as director of music, as well as an administrator. Bob, generations really of students have benefited from his talent and his concern. I'm sure he'd be delighted with the recognition that this rededication represents. And by coincidence, tomorrow, November 15th, would be Bob's 70th birthday. So I think that's especially appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, we would like to rededicate another facility. In the old building, there was a facility, it was called the Little Theater, that became Rogers Theater, named after one of our legendary drama teachers. And is there a member of the Rogers family here? Going once, going. There is a member of the Rogers family. Hey. And I'd like to ask Bill Plott to come up to say a couple words. We have a lot of members of the Rogers family. So let me document the unveiling. Why don't you take it off?
Sam, come on.
Half the audience of the Rogers family.
Anybody else want to join in?
Okay, why don't you, let's take it off. Can someone get on the other side and maybe it'll go a little better?
Go faster?
We spent a lot of money on this technology.
This is the second time I've been called on to speak about Harriet. I'm only sad that unlike the first occasion when she retired from Lincoln-Sudbury, she isn't here to listen. Not a day goes by when we don't miss you, Harriet. I had the great privilege to have Harriet Rogers as my colleague, my friend, and my teacher. The 4 years I spent as her tech director and all the years following when I picked her brain were the best education I ever had. Most of the time I got paid for it, too. Harriet had amazing talent, energy, and theatrical knowledge. She taught me above all that the kids would give me more on stage and behind the scenes than I could ever reasonably expect if I could just be patient and learn how to find it. Never did get the hang of that patience stuff. The way I learned how to find it was by watching Harriet at rehearsal, in the office, not infrequently in her house on Brooks Road, and during performances. You don't know what fun is unless you got to watch Harriet watch her cast perform. She never sat, she bounced. And she lived and died with every part, willing every actor up there to get it right. And it felt like for Harriet, they always did. My only standard as a director was, what would Harriet think of this? When she was in Lincoln, I would call her with questions, and she always took the call, Always knew what the right thing to tell me was. Always fixed my problem in a couple of minutes with a suggestion or a soothing word or just some encouragement. Long after her retirement, she'd call Jude and me and tell us to come over and give her the latest gossip, an invitation we loved to get. Among her other talents, Harriet was a great mimic who could do anybody on the faculty. We saw it all. She used to sit in her office all the time, puffing on cigarettes. That was when we used to be able to smoke in the building. In fact, some of us used to smoke in class, as I recall, and Barb Athy and I used to smoke on the way to school, but that's a whole other story. She used to sit in her office, and she'd light a cigarette and tap the ash in her sneaker and do deadly imitations of the faculty. I'm only sad, and I guess a little bit sad, that I never got to see her bill plot. Though I can imagine it, and I know it was deadly. I'll bet you that Harriet and Jenny right now are chuckling at us. Well, they might be muttering a little bit about never having had a chance to use these great theaters, but they're also happy that the kids have them. Harriet and Jenny, at least we did one thing right. We opened with Midsummer Night's Dream. We did our best to bless this place in your memories and your names.
Okay, we're looking for some members of the Kirshner family. And I.
Yes, you go up, Rosie.
And
It's going to take us a few minutes. Just park the red seat chair.
This is a very emotional thing for me because Dick Kirshner went to my high school. We're fellow alumni of David Clinton High School in the Bronx.
That's right.
Right, Dick? In fact, Ginny had me play a trick on Dick on his 70th birthday. I got a copy of the Clinton News and morphed into it a story that records had been found in the basement of the high school. And apparently there was this one student who had not fulfilled his phys ed requirement. And Clinton was demanding that he come back or turn in his diploma. Kirshner, would you like to take a sign off?
All right, over here. Oh, very good. Okay.
And I'd like to call Brad Sargent up here. Former superintendent principal of Lincoln-Sudbury Regional High School.
A flood of memories go by me in the last hour or two. And Bill said he'd say a few words about Ginny. I've always believed that performing arts was probably the heart and soul of an educational institution. And clearly Lincoln-Sudbury is fortunate in having the kind of folks who made it the very, very best programs that they could. Ginny always rose to the occasion. There was never a time when there was detail about what tickets were being sold or what the weather would be that night or whatever. She had time and energy and persistence to see that the show would go on, and it always did. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the great gift that Dick and Ginny gave to Lincoln-Sudbury, and that was to know their children as students here. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know if we have any members of the Horton family here. We do. Would you like to
this is bittersweet a little bit. George was one of my two best friends. The other one's right here. George was a tremendous teacher. He actually got that job that I was looking for as a student. And needless to say, he was the right choice, without a doubt. He did a tremendous job. He was capable to teach any course and was excellent with the kids. His coaching was outstanding. He coached the baseball team, the soccer team, the basketball team, and the golf team, all to state finals, which is an incredible record. And, excuse me, the softball team, all to state final performances. And that was the kind of person he was. He was one of my, as I said, two best friends. And the three of us really had an exceptional situation, an exceptional experience to be able to work together, support each other, and enjoy each other as much as we did.
Thank you. Okay, there's one more facility or resource that needs to be rededicated, but we didn't put it on the board because it's in the library. And I'm going to take the paper off it. I'm going to climb up. If you hear it crash, just know it didn't go well. Okay, some of you might be able to see it. Move the board. Move the board.
Who's ever tried to remove a book from the library illegally, we're on to you.
Come over here. I'm going to be very quick.
Okay, I first met Paul in 1973 when I was hired at Lincoln-Sudbury, and I went to see him before the summer, and he was telling me what my courses were. And he said I was going to be teaching American issues. And I said, great, what's the curriculum? He said, there is no curriculum. And I said, well, what am I supposed to teach? He said, the world is your oyster. And that's epitomizes to me the Lincoln-Sudbury philosophy. You know, as usual, Mitchell said it best and briefest. But Paul, I just wanted to thank you not only for the books that made their way over here, and there's been a renaissance in the teaching of Russian history, so the books will be well used.
That's good news.
But I also want to thank you for something equally as important as the books, which was the example of your passion, your poetry, which just seemed to be part of your everyday discourse, and the great question that you would ask of your students at the end of every year. It's such an important question, but really, who has the time to ask it? I mean, we're all just so busy doing what we do. And the question is, what does it mean to be educated? That was Paul's question, and I think the most important question to be asked in and of an educational institution. The last thing I'll say about Paul is that I had to come in some summer, I forget what year, just to get some things. And I was surprised to find Mitchell in his office. And he was just sitting there, reading books. And it just seemed to all bring it back to the most elemental sense of what learning and education was. So may the Paul Mitchell Russian History Collection enjoy a long life here and be very busy in circulation.
You're a nice man, Bill.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak, be recognized? Tonight's the night. This concludes this portion of the evening. I will tell you about what comes next in a moment, but first let me just express again my heartfelt thanks to all of you for coming. It means so much to all of us and to the life of this school to have people participating, people from the past participating in the present. And it is just a privilege to see all of you. Welcome to our universe. My name is John Ritchie. I'm the superintendent principal. I will make a few remarks in a moment about this evening's program, where we've just been and where we are going and what we're about to hear. But since the topic that we will be pondering this evening is our place in the universe, I thought it would be appropriate, and we thought it would be appropriate, that we should begin the evening by defining our place in the universe through song. So I am pleased to present to you Ruth Hart and the LS Mixed Chorus. you very much, and once again, welcome. This is a terrific evening for us here at the school. As you know, we're celebrating a number of things. One is some vague version of our 50th anniversary. It's always a sort of moving target as to when the actual 50th is, but the school year 1956-57 was the first year in which students attended Lincoln-Sudbury Regional High School, so it's appropriate that this should be the season to celebrate our 50th. And just prior to coming here to the auditorium, we had an induction ceremony in the library in which 3 former faculty members, sort of legendary faculty members, Tom Michalski, Jim Dusenberry, and Andy Oleski, were inducted onto our wall of recognition, which is a wall that really celebrates the giants who have worked in the school. What was particularly neat, in addition to the induction, was to see so many former wonderful educators, superintendents, people who worked at the school in attendance, a number of whom themselves had been inducted onto the wall of recognition in past years. And the connection is that one of the past inductees was Virginia Kirshner, for whom this auditorium is named, and whose son is speaking to us tonight, and whose husband, Dick Kirshner, is here in attendance somewhere, and various family members. Very brief comment on Professor Robert Kirshner. What I get a kick out of it is we still have people on the faculty, in fact, in the group that planned this evening's program and say things like, oh no, well no, Bobby's speaking at 7:30. Who's Bob? Oh, Professor Kirshner. He, from my perspective, his life and intellectual career peaked in 1966 when he graduated from Lincoln-Sudbury Regional High School, and since then it's been a slow descent into the world of academia, on which we will be receiving a report tonight. But I have heard Bob speak before. I've heard him speak at this school, but I've also heard him speak often on National Public Radio, where he is liberally quoted whenever a major galactic event occurs, something larger than the opening of a mall in Sudbury, but more on the order of, I don't know, a new black hole or something. I think I'll move on from my attempt to introduce anything to do with astrophysics. But Robert Kirshner is a professor of astronomy and is the Clues Professor of Science at Harvard University. And as we said earlier, he is speaking on the very charming topic, Lincoln-Sudbury's place in the universe. Without further ado, Robert Kirshner.
Well, thank you very much. Oh, I've turned this on. That's better. No, is that better? That's fine. Okay. Great. Well, I didn't really have time to prepare a brief talk, so I thought I would just use my standard notes here. Where were we? Oh, no. Sorry. Wrong set of notes. Okay. 50th anniversary. Well, half a century sounds very good for an institution and a little less good for an individual. But unlike cosmic time, which stretches... Unlike cosmic time... yes. Unlike cosmic time, which stretches back for 14 billion years back to the Big Bang, human time, or in this case, school time, stretches back over what turns out to be, more or less, my time. That is, by cosmic coincidence, the age of the school and my age are more or less the same. And so I thought I would give you a little sense of the way the school has paralleled the development of at least one person. People often ask, when I talk on astronomical subjects, what happened before the Big Bang? I'm not too sure, but I do know what happened in the mythic age before Lincoln-Sudbury. Before Lincoln-Sudbury, Lincoln kids went to Concord High School, and Sudbury kids went to Sudbury's high school. And at the time, in this prehistory, this misty time before the beginning, we lived in Rome, New York. And my father, who's here tonight, was working for the Air Force, keeping the uneasy peace through electromagnetism. And my mother, after whom this wonderful auditorium was named, was raising my older brother and me, which was not easy, getting her start in community theater, and in 1953, I'll give you that in a second, in 1953, dealing with the twins. So this summer, I was on the way to, I passed through Rome, New York, and I thought it might be interesting to visit where I grew up and my old elementary school, the sort of before Sudbury, before the Big Bang. I thought it would be interesting, but I was completely wrong about that, except that it made me realize how lucky we were that my parents moved to Sudbury. Here's the place where we live, Rose Garden Apartments, rather modest place. We had a 2-bedroom apartment. You counted 2 kids, but then the twins arrived. And then here is my school, the Christopher Columbus School, named after the heroic navigator. It's a little bricked up and fenced off, and there are weeds growing at the Christopher Columbus School. We should not be smug about this, because the elementary school that I subsequently went to in Sudbury is now the state crime laboratory. Well, we did move to Sudbury. It almost didn't happen. My mother knew that there were good schools in a place called Lexington, but my father said last night that the house she wanted was out of our price range, somewhere in the high 20s, I think. Sudbury, that's thousands. Sudbury was also out of our price range, but he showed me he showed me 2 more reasons for pursuing public education. The twins who arrived in 1953, Kirshner A and Kirshner B. Patricia A. Kirshner is here tonight. Billy B's out in Washington. Well, here's the thing I want to show you, which is a clipping that my father has been keeping all these years about, from the Christian Science Monitor. The Christian and the Monitor part are missing, but he seems to have kept the part about science. I don't know about that. In any case, it's about Lincoln and Sudbury's remarkable new high school, which had been founded in 1957, the year we came to Sudbury. I cut this out, he cut this out and saved it. It says some interesting things about the school. The facts that popped right out at me were the population of Lincoln, 2,472 according to the Monitor in 1957, and Sudbury at 2,596, close enough to call a recount, as a matter of fact. Well, all 5 of us, including my baby sister Sarah, who is also here tonight, graduated from Lincoln-Sudbury, so it shows that this choice of going to this school worked out pretty well for us. We graduated from Lincoln-Sudbury and also from other places. While I was beginning high school in 1962, my mother began to take a personal interest in this exceptional place. Whoops. And here is her campaign advertising from that time. This is only positive campaigning, I would say. Good education on the one hand, taxes on the other, and common sense with Virginia Kirshner in the middle. How far are we getting to go with that? She took a personal interest in this place and was elected to the school committee. I have to tell you that as a kid going to the school, there was something a little weird about your mother somehow being in charge of the principal. And I remember one moment when the telephone rang in our kitchen, and I thought it must be Keith Emmons calling, and I could say something funny like, "Bobby's Electronics, what's my line?" This is what passed for humor among the scientifically inclined 13-year-olds. And after a brief, dignified pause, Dr. Leslie Tourville politely introduced himself and said, "May I speak to Mrs. Kirshner?" Yes. Well, all right. The one thing I wanted to say about my mother and this auditorium in the school is that, there's a lot of looking backwards that's been taking place today. We're thinking about the past, and I'd just like to remind you that there is a lot of focus on you as a result of the past. If you look at what is for a bull terrier called a pedigree, but for a human being, genealogy, you will notice you down here at the bottom. And the next layer up, of course, would be your parents, your mother and father. Up above that would be your grandparents. 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents. This is the population implosion, how the past is focusing down on you by a power of 2 in each passing generation. I'll come back to this later in the context of cosmic evolution. But I just wanted to say that my mother's view was very much on each individual, and each individual in the school, each individual in her family, each individual in the school, and as she became the drama person at the high school, in drawing out from each person the inner Martian, or whatever it was that they had inside them. So here's a picture of my mom at the time she was doing these things. Well, it's great to think about that, but what I really want to say is that her focus was also on doing things locally, and so there's a big contrast between thinking about the universe as a whole and thinking about things locally. What I want to do today, in just a brief 20 minutes or so, although it will seem much longer, is to talk about where Lincoln-Sudbury is located in space, where Lincoln-Sudbury is located in time, and also to say something about the actual substance, the actual material out of which this school is made, and its connection to the universe. Every atom in this universe came from previous atoms, previous stars in the universe, just as you are the result of all those forebears that were shown as powers of 2 in the previous slide. All right, so where are we? Well, I don't have to tell a highly educated audience like this in the 21st century that we are on Earth, that Earth is not the center of the solar system. This is something most of you are familiar with. And that the sun, of course, is the center of the solar system, but not the center of the universe. Or at least has no special claim to being the center of the universe. The sun is one of about 100 billion stars in the Milky Way galaxy. So we're just one of 100 billion stars in the Milky Way. In 1917, which is long before the founding of Lincoln-Sudbury, if you didn't know anything, they thought that the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, was the whole universe, and that our that system was the whole story. But that turns out not to be the whole story. And a number of people, including local people, worked on this. At the Harvard College Observatory, after the turn of the century, there were a remarkable group of women who were paid 25 cents an hour to work on astronomical observations. And among them was an extraordinary woman, Henrietta Swan Leavitt, who's shown here, who worked on a particular kind of star, variable stars. They got brighter and dimmer. And that turned out to be the key to finding out where we are in the universe, and eventually what time it is, how long it has been since the Big Bang. And the way she did that was by identifying a particular kind of star whose property is, these Cepheid variable stars, first of all, they're very bright, and secondly, they vary, they get brighter and dimmer, but the thing that tells you how, by measuring the period of getting bright, getting dim, period of the star, you can tell whether it's intrinsically bright or intrinsically dim. It turns out that the dim ones have a high kind of frequency, and the big ones have a low kind of frequency, as was demonstrated earlier with the mixed chorus. And so you see, she was able to tell the distances of stars by using this trick, by measuring their periods, seeing whether they were intrinsically bright, and then if they appeared dim, they must be far away. So it was a way of judging the distances to things once you use this fact about the stars. This was exploited by Edwin Hubble at the Mount Wilson Observatory, and he was able to show 2 remarkable things that have a lot to do with knowing where we are in time and space. First of all, he showed that the Milky Way, that galaxy that we're in, that system of stars, is not the whole universe. We live in a universe that is made up of other galaxies, more or less equivalent to the one that we're in. So there's a whole level of structure in the universe which we didn't know about in 1917, but which they learned about fairly soon. And the way he was able to do this was by looking at these fuzzy things, these other things that we now recognize to be galaxies, the equivalent of our own Milky Way, these fuzzy patches on the sky. And with the new telescopes that were available after the First World War, he was able to observe individual stars and to judge their distances using this method that had been worked out by Henrietta Leavitt, namely to measure the periods of the stars, know how bright they were, and figure out how far away the galaxies must be. Turns out, the same kinds of stars that were observed in our own galaxy are observed in this fuzzy patch, which is the Andromeda galaxy, 31. Only they're about 225 times dimmer, which means they're 15 times as far away. So we can measure the distances to other galaxies. The fact that the distance is very large, about 2 million light years, means that we're on the way to understanding the scale of the universe. The interesting thing about astronomy, one interesting thing about astronomy, is that it is always the subject of history. We're always seeing into the past. We have a literal view into the past. On Earth history, you have to go to the corner of the library to the Paul Mitchell collection to get the Russian history books. But here we can go into the night sky and read the history by looking at the light which has been traveling to us. As you know, the speed of light is very fast. It's a foot in a nanosecond. Foot is a unit of distance used in the United States and in Myanmar. And a nanosecond is a billionth of a second. So that means light travels from here to here, from your heel to your toe, in about a billionth of a second. Now, what that means is that you never see things exactly as they are now. You see them as they were when the light bounced off and left them a few nanoseconds ago. So I see people in the front row, the way they were 20 nanoseconds ago. The people in the back, curiously, look younger. Because I see them the way they were 100 nanoseconds. It almost always works out in an audience. I don't know why. Do not leave before the last word. Anyway, now in the universe it's the same thing. The things that we see nearby, we see more or less now. In the case of the Andromeda galaxy, it's about 2 million years ago. This is a little mental jujitsu getting loosened up, where I say nearby, 2 million years ago. 2 million away. And I'm talking about much more distant things, 1,000 times as far away, a few billion light years away. But this is the beginning of understanding where we are. Now, the interesting thing is, here's Albert Einstein, who did not attend Lincoln-Sudbury or he's shown here in a photograph, and the amazing thing about photography at that time is it showed what people could think were thinking. And here Einstein, you can see, is thinking about the universe, and he thinks, well, it must be static. And in fact, that is neither expanding nor contracting, just a steady thing. And this turned out, interestingly enough, not to be true. That observations show not only is the universe very large and made up of galaxies, which are more or less equivalent to the Milky Way, but they are not standing still. They are moving away, and in fact, moving away, apparently, from us. So it's a universe of galaxies. Each of the things that you see in this image, taken with the Hubble Space Telescope, named after Edwin Hubble, who did not attend, is a galaxy, a system of 100 billion stars. Even these little tiny flecks that you can barely make out are very distant galaxies, seen a long way back, and we'll talk about what the scale of it is. It turns out that the most distant galaxies that you can see are about 10 billion light years away. The light has been traveling to us for 10 billion years. Now, the other aspect of the universe, which is kind of fun and quite surprising, is that the universe is not static, it is expanding. And the evidence for that comes from taking the light from galaxies or stars and spreading it out into a spectrum. So I show you here the light from galaxies spread out into this beautiful little rainbow. You know what a scientist's job is. A scientist's job is to take something beautiful and to turn it into a graph. And the bottom, we have kind of graphs of the light from distant stars. And what you can see in it is the pattern of chemistry. The chemistry on the Earth, the chemistry I learned in the Lincoln-Sudbury chemistry lab from Ray Martin, who is here tonight, the only man who gave me attention. He also gave me the great gift of understanding the periodic table. And, I I understand you threw out the paper. Bread goes here, the main dish, and then the water glass is always on the right. And it goes the same all the way around. What you can see here are dark spaces, which are the absorption lines, with certain places where the light is missing. Those are due to the atoms in the atmospheres of the stars, and they're made of exactly the same atoms of sodium, calcium, iron that are present in the material of this school, which I'll come back, and in the chem lab. I assume we still have a chemistry lab. I learned that gym has become wellness. I don't know what chemistry is. It's probably become substance. Anyway, the interesting thing about these spectra is that you can measure very precisely where those lines are in the laboratory, and when you measure them from galaxies, you see the same lines, but you see it all stretched out to longer wavelengths, to the red, as if things were moving away from us, which we call the redshift. Now, the interesting thing is that Hubble then had two things in his hands. On the one hand, he had distances, which he had measured from the brightness of the stars, and on the other hand, he had the velocities, the spectra that showed how fast the galaxies were moving away from us. And he did what any scientist would do, which is to plot those up. And what you see is this kind of messy-looking plot, but this is, after all, 1929, the first time people understood this, that the nearby galaxies, the ones over here, are moving, some of them are even moving toward us. Check your homeowner's insurance. But most of them are moving away from us, and the more distant ones are moving away from us more rapidly. So we see a redshift proportion of distance, a stretching out of the universe in all directions. Now, this is the evidence that the universe is not static. It's doing something else. It's stretching out in all directions. It's expanding. Now, I'm a professor at Harvard, and many of the students and all of the faculty believe that what this means is that they personally are the center of the universe, and that everything revolves around them, or in this case, stretches away from them. I want to show you that no particular person has a special claim on being at the center of the universe. And then I'll try to turn that on its head at the end to make the point that that means everybody has an equal claim to being at the center of the universe. We could just as easily say Lincoln-Sudbury was the center of the universe as anything else. All right, let me try and show that this is true. I'll come back to, very good. Well, here I've taken this picture of the Hubble Deep Field and then stretched it out in all directions. That's all that's happened here is that the same picture stretched out in all directions. And you can see that an observer, an astronomer, around a planet, on a star, in that galaxy, it would look to them as if all the other galaxies were moving away from them. But there was nothing special about that galaxy. I could have chosen any other, and through the miracles of animation, I will now change my attention over to that one. And now, this is the same set of pictures. Nothing has changed except that I've lined everything up from the point of view of that galaxy. And the same set of pictures, this is exactly the same set of pictures, just lined up, looks to an observer on that galaxy as if everything is moving away from them, and that they feel as though they are the center of things. The truth is, none of them is. The whole universe, the whole picture in this case, is expanding. Nevertheless, I return to this. Since no one has a special position, we might as well pick here as being the center of the universe. I have to say, as someone who listened to Joni Mitchell as a child, to see that we are now tearing down the parking lots to put up schools somehow seems just the right thing. Put them in a school museum. Well, also I want to say that one thing about Lincoln-Sudbury is that it does seem to have an unusual faculty, and students are encouraged to become as peculiar as they wish. And I just want to show you somebody that I met at Lincoln-Sudbury who was at the absolute extreme. Max Georgiamoff, I met him in the library of Lincoln-Sudbury when I took out his book, 1, 2, 3, Infinity. And if you look at this picture, this is somewhat surrealistic. You know, mathematicians, there's a mathematics field called topology, which is about the shapes of things. To a topologist, something like a donut, a donut with a hole in it, you could deform the material of the donut to make a coffee cup, and it would have a handle which has just one hole in it. And to a topologist, a donut and a coffee cup are more or less the same thing. That is, at least there are things that can be transformed from one to another without ripping or biting, because they have this one hole. Of course, you see a lot of topologists with those chipped teeth because they can't tell the difference between a coffee cup and a donut. This is George Gamow's idea of the universe, which we think of as surrounding a person, but it's topologically equivalent to turning it inside out. Here you see the person at all edges of the periphery of this picture, and the universe inside. So here's the earth, and the person has their foot on the earth. Here's their brain. Here's their hair. Maybe I better not go any further into this, but the entire alimentary canal is whatever. All right. This is just to say that the conventional picture is not the only picture. The imaginative picture, I think, is just as valid. Lincoln-Sudbury may well be the center of the universe. This could be good. There's the eyes. Okay. All right. Well, the historical story sort of turns on its head in 1931. Einstein went to visit the Mount Wilson Observatory. Here's Edwin Hubble. There's George Ellery Hale, who built the telescope, patting on the head, fluid. The guy holding the chalk is, of course, the teacher. That's Einstein. And at this point, Einstein gave up on a static universe and thought, let's be right, the universe is expanding, the evidence shows it. This idea that the universe being static was something that Einstein had earlier, before the evidence showed that it was expanding. In order to make that happen, since he knew about gravity, gravity's pulling in, he thought there must be something else pushing out, which he called the cosmological constant. And he used the Greek letter lambda to stand for the cosmological constant. And it turns out that even after people discovered the expanding universe, some people didn't give up on the possibility that there might be this expansive quality to space itself, this cosmological constant. And here is from a Dutch newspaper. Everybody knows that English is a dialect of Frisian, so it's easy enough to read. It says, "Who, however, blows up the ball? What makes the universe expand or swell up? That is done by lambda." And the other answer cannot be given. This was an idea which nobody had talked about since about 1931. But I want to show you very briefly that there's some clue that maybe this idea is needed, and that it leads to a very extraordinary view of the constituents of the universe, and especially of the material world that we see around us, including this. How have we come to this? It's by using objects whose distance we can measure, just as Henrietta Leavitt had used those vibrating stars 60 years, 80 years ago. Only these stars are much brighter. These are exploding stars, supernovae we call them. There's a galaxy with that bright dot up there. That's an exploding star. They are as bright as about 4 billion stars like the sun. They're rare. There's only about 1 in a century in the galaxy, so when they find one, when we have one, we'll have a big party. But there are a lot of galaxies in the universe, so there's about 1 second in the universe, and if we're diligent, we can find many in a year. And if you take those supernovae and you measure them in the same way that Hubble measured the galaxies with the Cepheid variables, you can measure the distances to the supernovae by how bright they are, and you can measure their redshift, and you find that the relation between velocity and distance that we saw in Hubble's diagram from 1929 is still true now, only the supernova allows us to make a beautiful diagram, and they allow us to make it over a bigger stretch in distance, going out to about 2 billion light years, so 1,000 times farther away than the distance to the Andromeda Galaxy. This little red square down here is the Kremlin on this side, St. Basil over here, and the former Google department store over there. This little red square shows you the area that Hubble's original Hubble diagram occupied, the one that I showed you from 1929. This is the
modern one done by one of my students. Okay, so we live in an expanding universe, right? We've gotten rid of that cosmological constant because that was put in to make the universe static. But there's one more big surprise. Oh, sorry. There's one more big surprise to me, which is this slide, which I carefully prepared today. This is the history of the universe as we now know it. So on the top, I put big events in the history of the universe. So back here is the Big Bang, 14 billion years ago, and down at the other end is tonight, another big thing. And I've put on here some things that where we think we know what's going on. I put the first galaxies forming, that was a few billion years after the Big Bang. When the universe turns transparent, the glow from the Big Bang, you can see, is only a few 100,000 years after the Big Bang, so that we see almost all the way back now. Our galaxy formed about 10 billion years ago, the sun formed about 5 billion years ago, and that little sliver down at the end represents all of human history, that little piece down there, so I had to magnify it. And I magnified it down here, starting in 1956, going up to tonight. Turns out the stretch up there is about 15 billion years, 1.5 times 10 to the 10th years. This turns out, by some mere coincidence, to be 1.5 times 10 to the 9th seconds. Left as an exercise to student, if you were making a movie 50 years long, how fast? And never. So I put a few events on here. Lincoln-Sudbury founded. I cannot believe that I graduated so long ago, but anyway, I left out a few things here. Learning to drive, first kiss, you know, that stuff. Here is my mother's time at the high school. I thought you could put your life up here in this space, you know, when Jim became wellness and stuff like that. There's just one episode I would like to point out specifically, because I came straight to Samantha Parker's astronomy class. I gave a talk, unfortunately similar to this one. I mean, it includes some of the same fine things as this one. I was struck on visiting the high school with a number of things. One was how peaceful it was. When you come to this high school, there are no bells ringing. Somehow, students, most of them, materialize in a classroom. And the warmth of interactions between the students and the faculty were really quite extraordinary. It's not the way we do it. Take our clue from it. All right. So here we are, and there is a wonderful timeline out there, so I'm going to try to put some other things in. Okay. So I said we're at this end of this long river of time. We can look back with light and actually see that this happens. And when I was talking about your personal genealogy, I talked about how there were so many people in the past and only you in the present, how the population has imploded. But another way to think about it is the material of the past becomes the stuff of the present. For the physical world, for the atoms that are around us, the carbon atoms, the sodium atoms, calcium atoms in your bones, iron in your blood, oxygen in the air we're breathing, those atoms were literally made in previous generations of stars. And the supernova explosions that we're using as rulers to measure the size of the universe are one of the places where these new elements get made. So they're blasted out into the gas between the stars and they become the material for the next generation of stars. So we've inherited something from our ancestors' stars. It's ourselves. We are, in fact, we ourselves are made out of stars. And we have inherited all of this stuff, including the Earth. Ooh. We inherited the wind. Okay. So we have this expanding universe, and we know that in it there's a kind of tug of war going on between gravity trying to slow things down, and at least the motion of galaxies trying to speed the motion of galaxies out. We know that gravity would slow speed. It's quite interesting. My mother was able to anticipate this in her earlier work, where she balanced out the mass that slows things down in the universe against the motion where they would coast out. And this is definitely the common sense picture of the universe, but I'll show you in a second. It's not the true picture of the universe. There's something else involved in, and it is that cosmological constant is something like it, the thing that Einstein made up and later dated. And here's Einstein and his friend de Sitter. De Sitter you saw in the cartoon, he looked like the Greek letter lambda. Here he looks more like a professor. Here's Einstein pointing out to Willem de Sitter where you should look if you want to see the effects of cosmic change. If you want to know whether the universe was expanding faster or slower in the distant past, you should look at distant objects and find out whether the relation between velocity and distance is the same far away as it is nearby. Because if the universe has been slowing down, it would have been expanding faster in the past than it is now. And in the unlikely event that it's speeding up, the opposite would be true. So you should look at distant, very distant things, very far away, to find out what the history of the universe has been, to look deep into the past, to see the effects of gravity over time. And the amazing thing is that when we made these measurements, we found that the universe is not slowing down, as we expected due to gravity, that there's more than common sense, there's another ingredient. And the other ingredient that makes the universe speed up is something very much like the cosmological constant, very much like the thing that Einstein invented to make a static universe. And in an interesting piece of revisionism, we see Einstein carrying under his left arm a sheaf of papers, the top one of which has the Greek letter lambda on top of it. I told you so, he said. Actually, he seemed quite surprised. Actually, he did that for 30 years. But in any case, no wonder he's so surprised. Hasn't been picking up with things. All right. Now, what we call this stuff that's speeding up the universe is dark energy. If you want to know what something is in the middle of the beginning of the 21st century, of course, what we do is Google dark energy. Scientists don't know what it is, just look it up. And if you do, it turns out that at least a year ago, we used to hit on the website of American Hydroponics, a company which specializes in plant food, so that you can grow controlled substances in your closet. And the dark energy is a special kind of plant food that says these specialized processes are also responsible for the very distinct odor of dark energy. So we have this stuff which we think is present in the universe, which is making it speed up. We don't know what it is. It's certainly not. But it is something that might be the cosmological constants idea that Einstein had back in 1970. When you put the whole picture together, now that was in 1998. If you put the whole picture together with more recent data, it turns out that you can figure out how much of the universe has to be this expansive stuff that makes things speed up, how much of it is the invisible dark matter that is not atoms that makes things slow down, and how much of it is the atoms that are in the stars we see in the material of the universe. And the amazing thing is that the universe that we see, which is made of atoms, this school, which is made of atoms, are a very, very small fraction of the total material of the universe. That about 4% of the universe is atoms, every type of atom, mostly hydrogen, of course. There is something called cold dark matter, which has gravity. We know it's there because we feel it's cold, but we know it's not atoms because that would mess up the Big Bang. And this dark energy, which we didn't even know about 10 years ago, makes up most of the universe. Now, I can tell you that my colleagues at theoretical institutions are extremely proud of this diagram. Look, they say, it is full. You, being a skeptical person, should ask yourself, what is it full of? And in this case, I would say it is full of ignorance. That is, we don't know what the cold dark matter is, and we don't know what the dark energy is. It might be the cosmological constant, or it might be something else. So I think we can take quite a lot of pride in this. We ourselves are made of atoms. Our school, turns out, is made of something that only makes up a 25th of the universe. Rare stuff. Our school is not only plausibly the center of the universe, but it is made of atoms. And they are very uncommon in the universe. Well, I thought it was kind of interesting. All right. So this is a story about learning what the universe is made of, how it operates. This is an adventure that I personally got launched on here at Lincoln-Sudbury. I had wonderful teachers in science and in math. I was, 2 years ago, I was elected the president of the American Astronomical Society. And when you're the president of a society like that, you're often asked to speak to people about the subject of why they should give vast sums of money for your work. And there are certain surefire methods for getting vast sums of money, which we do need for our work. So what we often say is, well, you know, science is very important because it leads to development of technology. Technology is something that makes the economy go forward. It's been a surefire thing to say what we're doing is important to defense and we want this to be a safe country. Most congressmen are kind of old guys, and so medicine works fine. So the arguments that we often use are that science, the purpose of science is to make you rich and safe and, if not immortal, very long lived. Like Mrs. Coombs. Okay, rich, safe, and immortal. But I would say, if you think about the kind of science I've been talking about tonight, measuring various things, trying to answer these very deep riddles about where we are, what we're made of, where we're going. I would say that this kind of answer is not good enough because if we were rich and safe and immortal, whoops, oh, I missed my last slide, and bored, that would not be a vision of perfection. In fact, the reason why we do things like this kind of work is for the joy of finding out how the world works. Thank you very much.
Professor Kirchner has asked me to field any questions from the audience. Delightful. I just can't say enough about how charming it is to hear somebody who graduated from this school talk about the classrooms of this school, kind of detention in this school. For what was the detention?
Well, it was Keith and me, we were fooling around with the wash bottles.
Oh.
That is what I remember.
I thought it was perhaps accelerating down the hallway too quickly or something. But to have